Hi, and welcome everyone to today's webinar of Neptune Software with the topic Empowering ABAP Developers with the Neptune Digital Experience Platform. My name is Hendrik Braun, and I'm here with my colleague Avinash, and we're going to guide you through today's webinar. And yeah, hi Avinash.
Hi, Hendrik.
You. So yeah, today's topic, empowering ABAP developers. So let's talk about the challenges that ABAP developers will face when they're going to develop Fiori applications.
Cool. Yeah, actually, I would say that that would be also my challenge or my challenges that I faced when I was just an ABAP consultant, and then got to know about Fiori, trying to learn Fiori and UI5. And it's basically that's a new trend in app development when it comes to SAP space or SAP environment. And UI5 or Fiori is taking off like anything because the future with SAP for the end users is with Fiori. So it's very important for anyone in a developer in SAP environment to start their journey towards just being an ABAP consultant who is developing only in ABAP world, move towards what you call the Fiori or UI5 technology as well.
And what
So,
was your biggest challenge on your journey, as you said?
well, for me, I started as an ABAP developer, so that was my beginning of my career. So all I knew about SAP was just ABAP. And maybe some parts of the WebDin Pro because I studied or I got trained into that, and I worked on few projects into WebDin Pro technology as well. But at the end, it was still ABAP and OOPS ABAP, what you call object-oriented ABAP technology. But when you come to Fiori or UI5, what are those? Those are like web applications, right? And every web technology or web applications comes with different layers. For example, you have numerous number of front-end technologies. For example, like the most commons like being React, Vue, Angular JS, or maybe just HTML5 with normal CSS, right? Uh, but when Fiori or UI5 was introduced, UI5 or SAP UI5, what they called is a whole new front-end framework in itself. So all in all, for me, the main challenge was coming out of this shell of just ABAP and exploring a whole new technology of front-end frameworks. So in that way, I started learning about HTML5, then which gives you a very basic web page. But again, then comes different front-end frameworks like SAP Wi-Fi, and that was the one which is required for Fiori. So my biggest challenge was to learn about web technologies and then also managing the migration from WebDin Pro, which were the web apps at that point of time, way back in like 2012, 2013. Moving from this Fiori, WebDin Pro, ABAP-based WebDin Pro for web applications to Fiori, which completely demarcates or what do you say, there's a clear separation between your front end, the middleware, and the back end, right? So if you know everyone out there, the Fiori runs with the OData service, which is your data provider or the data source. And then you have front end with SAP Wi-Fi running with views and controllers where you can have all your nice looking web applications that can run on any type of devices for the end users. So the biggest challenge, what I would say, is learning a complete new front-end framework for the ABAPers if they don't know anything about web technologies, and also having an additional skill set with OData services. And this is, by the way, this OData service is the most common or a normal use case. coming from S4HANA as well, which is the future of SAP. Then they introduce CDS waves, annotations, all those new technologies, which still gives me cold chills sometimes when I think about CDS views, which I don't know. Uh, but the biggest challenge for any developers this day as well is if they want to go towards a standard Fiori approach, then it's UI5 or SAP UI5 technology, the Fiori design guidelines, as well as the OData services, which will be their main data source.
True, and you're all talking about technologies, but it's also programming languages, right?
Exactly. I mean, when it comes to web technologies, SAP Wi-Fi is a different programming language. It's based on XML, JavaScript, maybe JSON as well, because it provides different view types. But basically, you need to know XML, JavaScript, JSON, as well as for OData services, it could be normal CDS views or ABAP. So ABAPers can still survive with OData service, but when it comes to front end, sometimes it's a bit difficult to um, gain an expertise into these new technologies in very short time.
Okay. Yeah. So, and how in this big picture of UI5 apps, Fiori apps, web development, how can Neptune help ABAP developers with it, or how do we empower ABAP developers?
Exactly. That's the main point of this webinar. And how Neptune can help you is just to put it out there. Neptune Software or Neptune DX platform was developed by SAP consultants. And they came from this world of ABAP and they knew what the problems that they faced to go towards web applications. It was jQuery based then by then, and then we shifted our focus to SAP UI5. How Neptune can help any ABAPers is that we provide a lot of tools. So we provide a very low code platform for designing your front end, um, and then using your existing backend business logic as part of your data source. So here we are not talking about just the OData service as well, right? Because when you talk about Fiori, it's always OData service, what you always consider to be using into Fiori applications. But when what Neptune comes with is um, you can create or use a normal ABAP class, like an object-oriented ABAP class, as your data source. So you don't even need to worry about the science behind OData service so much. All you can do is just use one of Neptune's interface that we provide out of the box, and then expose your normal ABAP class as a data source. And then coming to the front end, which is the main concern for ABAPers, is to learn JavaScript and XML views, all those high, I would not say high-end technologies, but all the new technologies, what they feel like they have to invest so much time into learning them. Where Neptune comes into rescue is the low-code app designer, wherein you can just drag and drop the UI elements, like the input box, the buttons, where the form should go, where the table should look like. So everything is just a drag and drop. And the front-end code is generated dynamically by our platform. So in a way, an ABAPer need not worry so much about the front end, how like a concern is like, okay, I want to create a UI5, or I want to create a web page where I can use, I would like to show some forms with few fields and few buttons, and then there should be a navigation to the next page, and then I have to show a table with the results. So if you don't know about SAP UI5 or JavaScript, don't worry about that. The Neptune DXP's app designer will provide all the help that you can have. which reduces like almost 90% of the front-end coding that is required for these kind of applications. And put your focus back onto the ABAPers, because ABAPers have been a very backbone of your enterprise architecture when you talk about SAP. So ABAPers are
Right.
the main people who are actually designing your or developing your business logic. So focus on those things and stop worrying about the front end, because Neptune got your back there.
Exactly. Even those needed JavaScript functions, I mean, it's still, of course, we have a drag and drop approach, and we do a lot of things with that. But at the end, there is still some JavaScript needed, and even for that, we provide those JavaScript code snippets for most of the UI5 components. So everything is is set up already and out of the box usable.
Exactly.
But yeah, sorry.
Exactly. Just to add point is that the code snippets are provided by Neptune out of the box, right? But that does not stop the code snippets to expand.
True.
So everyone can create their own code snippets, as well as the size of the code snippets or the number of code snippets that is coming with the Neptune package is always increasing. So there's always a sense that, okay, what would be a good code snippet that everyone would need, which are the most commonly used lines of JavaScript. So it's always
Mhm.
increasing. So the DXP is always evolving based on what the market needs, what the developers need exactly. And of course, um, talking about there are a bunch of other very great benefits when you go towards Fiori with Neptune DXP.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's for now it's enough about the front-end development. For everyone out there, if you don't know, just check our community. There's a lot of information about every single part of the Neptune Digital Experience platform. But I think now what we want to see and the ABAPers want to see is how do we set up an ABAP class as a data provider class for a Neptune Fiori app, right? So let's
Exactly.
have a look into that.
All right, let's take a deep dive and let me switch to our classic GUI, SAP GUI. This is where the bread and butter of an ABAPer lies in. Um, so basically what we are talking is this is our sandbox system, and I would like to show how an ABAP class can be created, um, which can be then used as a data source into Neptune's app designer and create like to be used into a Fiori application. So let's go into a transaction called SC24. So all developers would know this. This is a place where you create your classes, SC24 class builder. And I already have created a class which I can show you how the things can be structured. So this is one class. It's called training hybrid class, which we can use. Uh, Going into display mode is this is a normal class with few methods which are private, and there are attributes which are like some are private, some are public in here. Like there are some internal tables, there are some structures, all those things. But the main part is how we can convert this ABAP class into a data source for Neptune. So that comes into a picture, or that comes when you try to run or implement certain interface provided by Neptune. And this interface is out of the box, and this interface acts as a connector to a connector between the front end of the Fiori app and the backend business logic for your Fiori app. So this interface, you can just search for the interface in here, for example, if Neptune DXP is installed on your NetWeaver's system or your ECC system, then just go there and search for slash Neptune slash, oops, typo, slash and star. Maybe your F4 helper will show you the list of all the interfaces. So there's so many interfaces that are provided, but of course not all are for Fiori applications. Because we also have API factories, REST-based APIs, all those. But the interesting part will be this one. It's called Neptune Server Interface. You can always use this or implement this so that you get different methods in here. Right, so these are the methods which are part of the Neptune server interface. And of course, all these serve different purposes. Like sync in and sync out are usually used for global synchronization of your offline applications, and the rest ones are like the on request, on response, wherein you want to call this business logic anonymously from in the background from your applications. But the interesting part for any like a normal application is this method, handle on Ajax. And handle on Ajax gives you certain parameters like application ID, Ajax ID, Ajax value, then the instance of the server, the request body or the request object, and there are a bunch of other stuff as well. And how the call from your Neptune backend or your Neptune application from the front end to the back end is linked is whenever there's a class, whenever there's an app, the app triggers certain events, which in turn triggers a call to its application class. And then every call that is made to the backend, the call comes to this method, handle on Ajax. So whenever there's a call to the backend, the program flow comes into this method and providing you all the different input parameter or import parameters like Ajax ID, Ajax value, the instance of the Neptune server itself if you want to use that for some purpose, or you have other informations like request body if you want to use request object for some purposes for like locking or maybe sending the response to the server directly from the method. But the important part is the Ajax ID. This parameter gives you the event ID. So this is part where you would like to know how the apps can be designed with consuming this class, which we will show in some point. But the call comes into, the event ID comes in as Ajax ID, and based on different Ajax IDs or based on different events, we want to perform certain business logic. For example, when I want to get a customer, then I can send or trigger an event with an event ID called get customers. With a case statement, which is a very basic ABAP syntax, you can redirect your calls to certain methods with a specific business logic in there. For example, in here, I can see it's a normal select query. Of course, this is not a recommended by but for just for demo purpose, I think this is fine. So in get customers, I would run a select query, or maybe if you want to be more elegant way of ABAP development, then you can always go with poppies, or you can always go with specific search criteria to fetch a list of customers if you want to use the select queries. But this is one event ID, and there can be any number of event IDs. But you can, there's always this applications, and when we talk about Neptune DXP, there we are always talking about, or we always tell to our customers or any prospects out there that with Neptune DXP you can develop apps that could work in an offline mode as well as in online mode, right? So what does it mean? Like there's online and offline. What does it mean? Online mode of applications is that for every action that is performed by the end user, there is a call going to the SAP server, which comes into this class, what we show here. It comes into this method and it performs certain business logic and sends a response based on the business logic and whatever validations or fetching of the data or update of the data that is being done as part of the business. But what does an offline app mean is that for every action, it is not required to connect to SAP servers. You can always sync in or synchronize all the master data together in one into offline cache or device cache, and that's the part where we can learn more about offline capabilities of Neptune in our community and our YouTube channels. There are some videos there that you sync in all the master data on the device with which is required on daily basis or maybe on weekly basis, and then you play with those data. So for example, in this ABAP class that you can see, there is a sync option, right? There's a Ajax ID with a sync. And what does this do is we are saving the outbox, which is not doing anything here right now. But I think it's like, for example, if you are modifying, let's give an example, right, Hendrik,
Yeah.
that for for a plant maintenance scenario, what do you think, like for plant maintenance, why is it required for an offline capability there?
Well, often the workers who are using those apps, the users, are in certain areas where they don't have network connection. Easy as that. As I don't know if it's a big building where they're down in the cellar and there's a lot of stones on top of them, so there's
Mhm.
no connection. So.
Exactly. So if you lose connection and considering the plant maintenance scenario itself, they always have their service notifications and work orders that they perform maintenance based on their work orders. Um, so when it comes to an offline scenario, how or where the apps could work perfectly fine in those scenarios is that you synchronize all the work orders that are assigned to uh, a maintenance person, right? A support professional who is going on to a plant maintenance maybe for a whole day or maybe for a whole week. What you can always do is you synchronize the master data with all the work orders, the service notifications, the details about those, synchronize everything into your app. Then you go offline and you still be able to access these data. You use the data or you work on the work orders. You can change the status of the work orders and then you save it. Since you do not have any connection to the SAP server, the data can be saved inside your applications. And that's what I was trying to explain is what could be an outbox here. The outbox will be a kind of a table or a storage area that can save all your updates. And when you synchronize, you first send the update to the business or the backend ERP system, and then you start working on getting the fresh master data. So that's where the get customers come into picture. I fetch all the customers after the update, and then I fetch all the sales orders regarding that customer, right? And then also I can get some more master data. For example, in this scenario, what I'm showing here is getting a master list of all the country codes that are in your SAP system. So when you use this as an offline, then all you have to do is just one call to the backend with an event ID called sync in this case, or you can name it whatever you want. Just being a meaningful name is a sync or a synchronization for sure. And then you synchronize everything and then use it. But in case if you are like online, then you can always trigger an event called save in this example, and then you can come here and play with something like modify KNA1 table in this example, or for any business other example of plant maintenance, what we call, then you can commit the changes to the work order and update the status of the work order for plant maintenance example. So the main idea to understand for any ABAPer here is all you need to understand is this interface, the one of the interface that is provided by Neptune out of the box, and what to implement with these interface is just focus your all the attention to this point of entry. We can call this as a point of entry, the handle of Ajax, and from there you can have all your private methods just to be secured enough, they're private or protected methods, and then you can have only public methods from the interface, Neptune interface. But how do you bind this to the front end, right? Because the front end can have your forms, a front end can have your list or a table to be displayed. So how the binding works with Neptune is that for any class, there are something called attributes, wherein you have tables, you have structures, or you have global variables, you can say. All you have to do is just declare these tables or structures which you want to be used as binding as public, and then these things will be available into the binding area of our app designer. And of course the structure here can be as simple as like a normal table, or you can always append different structures on each of them. So you just have to convert or declare all the attributes that you want to use it for binding or binding the structure, because the binding is very powerful tool on Neptune, wherein it can help you with wizards to create front-end fields automatically. You don't need to use even the drag and drop. Just right-click wizard and the fields for the table or the fields for the simple form will be generated automatically based on the binding. So that's why you can always have visibility as public, and then of course like an instance variable or instance attribute. This is fine, of course, and it is always recommended because in a normal way, the Neptune apps also work as a stateless apps. So for every call that you are sending, you need to send whatever data you want to play with back to the SAP server, and then you can play with a table or a structure, and then you can reuse the data that has already been into your application for a long time. Right. So basically what I would say is for an ABAPer to know how you want to design or how you can use Neptune interface, and then you can design your own ABAP classes. I'm pretty much sure you're way more skilled than me into object-oriented ABAP, I can say. So it's up to you how you want to design your ABAP classes. But when it comes to using these ABAP classes as data source to Neptune apps, all you have to do is understand the interface that I explained now, and then you should be good to go there.
All right, so this is the way how we configure or how we create an ABAP class to use it as in a Neptune app. So, but the Neptune Digital Experience Platform, especially the SAP edition, has the possibility to expose an ABAP class as a REST API. So this is a big or important feature that gives our customers the possibility to use SAP data outside of SAP, right?
Yes. with the introduction of this API designer, from where you can create REST-based APIs from your ABAP classes. Of course, there is a new concept in SAP world of RESTful programming model, which is also based on ABAP, what is called. But that's underneath it. It all lies with CDS views and BOP framework, and that's also part of. Few of them are part of S4HANA, and few are part of some other core layers like CRM and travel transport management, all those. So I'll not get into the RESTful programming model that is given by SAP, because underneath it's all about CDS views and BOP framework. But with Neptune, you can actually a real REST-based API based on RESTful protocol of APIs. You can create those kind of APIs with normal ABAP class. You don't need to worry about CDS views. You don't need to have even S4HANA for that matter. You can start with your microservice architecture. So that's the keyword that we want to emphasize on, microservice architecture. That's the future of B2C or B2B businesses, right?
So
Business to
to make
business or
this,
business.
yeah,
Sorry?
sorry. To make this clear, that means that with Neptune Digital Experience Platform, you can create a RESTful API out of an ABAP class, and with on every SAP system that can run Neptune. Is that
Exactly. All you need is a Neptune add-on installed on your SAP system. And I can clearly show the same ABAP class, which I had designed to be used as a data source for an app in the app designer, is that we provide a one more interface. So I can use an ABAP class for a data source for an app designer, or also I can convert this into a RESTful API. How do I do that is just search for our Neptune interface, and let me search for something called REST API. Here it is. So IF REST API, double click on this and voila, that's it. You don't need to change anything in the design or in the method implementation because everything remains the same. Only thing that is required is the methods which you want to expose as operations of API or the functions of API as public. For example, get customers. This I would like to convert from private to public, and maybe get master data as well from private to public. That's it. So now what happens is that when I want to create or define an API on our API designer from Neptune Cockpit, I can search for this class as a data provider class, this class as data provider class, and then have these methods as part of the functions of the REST API. I can quickly show you that as well, right?
Yeah.
This is our cockpit running on version 6.0, but of course the API designer has been there since 5.0. So of course we had a major release just last week with big changes onto the front end, the different tools that we introduced. But here under the connectivity, there's REST API, and then I can go with API designer. And in here, let me create one new API. I can say, I would say webinar API. Just give it a name and a path like webinar API. And then the data provider class here, right? And if you remember, if I go back here directly, this is the name. So I'll go back to the cockpit and I'll say I would search for hybrid. So that was the name. And this list of classes comes or is populated based on what we had implemented is the interface, this interface. So the list already filters for only those classes which are actually possible to be exposed as API. So I do this. And of course, the package, the transport request, that's all like a normal ABAP thing. And of course, you can always have RFC destinations and have anonymous calls as well. But for now, this is fine. Let me just save this. And of course, I can always see the coding, the ABAP code in the API designer itself. So from here, I can make out if we know how to read ABAP code. I'm sure for every ABAPer that is a normal thing. So what we can see here is a public section. So these will be available for you to be used inside this API directly. So let me create one operation and I would say get customers. And the method in here is like get, and we support all the CRUD operations of the API. So there's a read, update, delete, and create as well. So right now I'm just reading it. So I can use get operation here, and this field method data provider class, or the method from the data provider class. And this gives me the list of all the public methods that you can use. And for us is get customers. That is what I'm trying to do. And that's it. And you can of course give summary tags, descriptions, which are optional for you. And the request body here is nothing, because if I go back to the method definition, get customer, it has no parameters. So for example, let me put one parameter just to show you if this works. Is I'll say importing parameter of type string. Let me activate this. Okay, I'll make it optional. Be good. And switching back to the cockpit, now if I save, does not have this. Okay, let's forget the changes. And let me go back to the one I just created. This is, and the class is still the same. And I create a new operation, what I was about to create last time. I'd say get customers and then method as get, and the actual class method is the customers. And in the request, now you can see the parameters. So basically the parameters of the get request are the import parameters of the class method. And this is optional, which is reflecting from the backend configurations or the ABAP class configuration. And as part of the response is that I get the list of all the public attributes. So you see all these tables and structures. These are all actually the public attributes of the class in here. So going back to the cockpit, I would like to get a response in ITKNA1. Just save this, and my RESTful API with get customer operation is ready to be used onto any external platform out there. As well as you can always use these APIs as data source onto our applications, on the Neptune applications as well. So in a way, what Neptune gives you is not just OData service, but also in addition to OData service, we give you more options as data source, having your ABAP class as a normal ABAP class as a data source, as well as having your ABAP class as a RESTful API. So those are the two additional data source options in addition to OData services, which is just a standard way of um, having a data source onto Fiori Apps. So of course we can test this with the Swagger UI here as well. Searching for mine, and we support OPIs, Open API specifications as 2.0 and 3.0 now. And let it load. This is the URL which you can always use. I can test this here with a get operation and Ajax value, which was like a optional for me. Just execute, and then I should be able to get response from the ABAP class. It's running. So here you go. You have 500 customers with whole IT KNA1 structure and all those fields coming here, and then having 500 customer records as JSON. And then, of course, you can use this onto different platforms, into different types of applications. But why, or what are the advantages of having ABAP class over OData service? That's normal question, because having a standard Fiori approach, there's always an OData service, and we know, okay, OData service is kind of a open data protocol, which has been used by SAP very much for Fiori, all those stuff. But what advantages that Neptune can give you with this approach of having ABAP class as a data source? One thing is that you can have stateful applications. Right, stateful, that is one more term that you would know if you have worked with WebImpro applications, with CRM, Solution Manager, all those. Stateful is something where you can maintain the instance of your backend business object. So you can create stateful applications very easily, just one click, and no need to worry about that. So with ABAP class on Neptune DXP, stateful is one possibility. The main advantage is the performance. So to compare with the OData service, the response time is almost 50% less when compared to OData service. The size of the response body is also 50% less when compared to the OData service. So basically, it's a when there's a communication, when there's a communication web technologies, usually the performance of the response, or the response time of your OData services or any data source, as well as the size of the response body matters. Because even for this 500 customer records that we saw today as an example, the response time is very much less compared to the OData service, as well as the size of the response body is less. For the same amount of 500 customers, could be like, for as an instance, I would say the response body size would be like maybe 1 MB or 1 megabytes. But when using class-based approach with Neptune, or REST API-based approach with Neptune DXP, the response body size would be half a MB, or maybe 500 kilobytes. This is an example with the numbers, but the proportion or the ratio is almost the same what we are saying. It's 50% less response time and 50% less in the response body size as well. So basically, that's all an ABAPer should be worrying about when we talk about Fiori, right? Or are there any questions that you have, Hendrik?
Oh no, I think you covered it all. So yeah, thank you, Avinash. I think we all of us learned a lot and saw a lot. Thanks for that deep dive into the Neptune platform, and especially how to prepare the ABAP class to be used in a Neptune app or any else app with that RESTful approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to all of you out there who are watching and listening us, if you have any questions, please use the go to question part, or just give us a call or an email. Use our community. Check out YouTube. There's always a lot going on in all our social media channels. So yeah, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it and learned something today. And yeah, see you next time.
Yeah, yeah, guys, have a great day. Have a great time and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.